Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's FYN Virtual Learning Series session. Before we get started, I wanted to take a minute to acknowledge that today is an important date, both in Canada and abroad. So today is May 25th, and this marks the one-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. And that was an event that has really had a significant impact on Canada, on the United States, and across the globe. So in terms of opening up conversations about race in Canada, and specifically in the government of Canada as well. So as we go through today's event, I'd like you also to reflect on the part that you can play. So in continuing progress on anti-racism and diversity and inclusion in the government of Canada, and reflect on the impact that the murder of George Floyd has had over the last year, and where we can go from here in terms of improving the opportunities and improving the lives of racialized Canadians, and improving their experience in the government of Canada. I'll quickly mention a few ways that you can get involved, either as an ally, or as a member of a racialized community in Canada. So there are a few initiatives that I'll highlight in the government of Canada. So one is the Anti-Racism Ambassadors Network, currently co-leading a panel pledge on diversity and inclusion to look at inclusion of equity-seeking groups in all conferences and learning events. As well as the Federal Black Employees Caucus, which has taken a leading role on this file over the last year and over the last few years. So we'll put some links in the chat, but I just wanted to mention that before we get started. And now I will hand off to your moderator for the day, Benoit. Alors, merci Benoit, et le parole, c'est à vous. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Ça me fait plaisir, Josh. Thank you very much for that important message. I think there's a lot of worth in exactly everything you said there. So my name is Benoit Casey. Welcome to today's segment on communicating who you are in the workplace. Communication in a virtual world, like Josh mentioned. My name is Benoit Casey. Bonjour et bienvenue à la séance aujourd'hui de communiquer qui vous êtes, la communication au travail dans un monde virtuel. Je m'appelle Benoit Casey. So the reality of living in a virtual world has meant that most of us had to quickly adapt to a new way of communication. We had to determine what our needs were and how to get them met. Today, our panelists will share what they figured out to help figure out for themselves and their teams what they needed to lead them into this new world of communication. So, le fait de vivre dans un monde virtuel a amené la plupart d'entre nous à nous adapter rapidement à des nouvelles façons de communiquer. Nous avons dû déterminer quels étaient nos besoins et comment les exprimer d'une façon adéquate. Aujourd'hui, nous découvrirons de quelle façon nos experts ont compris ou aidé à comprendre les besoins de leurs équipes et comment ils ont guidé dans le monde de communication virtuelle. But first, before just diving in, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm on land which I'm joining you on today is traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and I'm very grateful. We are very grateful to have the opportunity to be present today. So, and as we move through today's session, please share your comments in the chat space and questions by using the Q&A function in the language of your choice. You can vote up questions by clicking the thumbs up button if you like as well. Au fur et à mesure que nous progresserons dans la session aujourd'hui, veuillez partager vos questions en utilisant le bouton de questions et réponses, le Q&A. Et vous pouvez voter pour les questions que vous voulez poser en cliquant sur le bouton qui a un petit thumbs up. So today, we have two panelists joining us. They'll share their expertise and thoughts around today's topic. Let's get a chance to meet them. Aujourd'hui, nous accueillons deux panélistes. Ils partageront leur expertise. Donc, allons les rencontrer. Premièrement, je vais céder la parole à Tammy Carroll. So Tammy, Carroll, the mic is yours.
Excellent. Merci, Benoit. Very happy to be here. Delighted to be joining you live from Dieppe, New Brunswick. Alors, je vais m'introduire et tantôt, je vais aussi répondre aux questions à la fois en français et en anglais. So I'll be kind of interchangeably changing French to English and vice versa. Benoit, please chime in if you're okay, time you switch anytime. So a little quick introduction on my background. So I've been working for the Government of Canada for about 18 years. I started as a student quite a few years ago. And I've been really delighted and I think very fortunate to have been working all those years in my field of interest and passion, which is organizational psychology. I have a master's and PhD in that domain. And I guess right at the moment, I am working with Health Canada as a senior advisor, and just less than 2 months ago, I was working with ACOA, the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency. Alors, that's good for me. Merci.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Merci de t'avoir présenté. Paul, you're up. The mic is on your side now.
Awesome. Thank you, Benoit. Pleasure to be here. I'm Paul Keller from Quebec City. Je suis un chargé de projet au Conseil fédéral du Québec, donc au Lab d'innovation du Conseil fédéral du Québec. Je suis là depuis février 2020, donc juste avant la pandémie. Avant ça, j'étais un agent de recouvrement de cas complexes à l'Agence du revenu du Canada. Donc, j'ai fait ça pendant 8 ans de temps au recouvrement là-bas. Puis, j'étais aussi ambassadeur de l'innovation. Et de fil en aiguille, ben, ça m'a amené dans le domaine de l'innovation. Alors, also available to speak in both languages, answer questions in both languages as well. So feel free to choose the one of your choice. And I am on the traditional unceded territory of the Wendat Hurons and the St. Lawrence Iroquois.
Thank you very much, Paul. Much appreciated. Merci beaucoup, Paul. Donc, on va sauter dans les questions. On va commencer directement avec les questions qu'on a pour vous autres, pour voir comment que vous avez ajusté pendant cette dernière année qui était pas mal unique. So we'll jump right into the first series of questions that we've got, the first Q&A, just to kind of go back and forth between us, since this year has been pretty different to what we're used to. I'll start with you, Tammy. Since March 2020, what are some of the communications trends that you've observed in our workplaces?
Yeah, thank you, Benoit. So I'm going to answer this question in two parts. So the first one, how, and the second, what. So how? So how has our communication at work changed? Well, I think no news to any of you, there's definitely has been a trend or a shift to video conferencing. Obviously, that's kind of a version that we're having at the moment. So with many of us working from home and social distancing, we kind of needed to find ways to keep connected and do our work, obviously, for which most of us as public servants requires human interactions, right? So they're needed to have some form of communication. So this created enormous changes in our communication habits. We can think of Zoom, Microsoft Teams, WebEx. And just a quick tip while I'm on it. So I've been with Health Canada for about a month, so integrated into a new team. And there is one thing for sure that I really appreciate from my team is that we're having a lot of short meetings. And what I mean by short is 30 to 45 minutes. And it seems to be a best practices because in my work, what I was doing previously with ACOA was as an ICMS practitioner, informal conflict management system practitioner, I was hearing a lot of stories, and not just actually at the agency, but from other departments with my colleagues, my peers, was that there were, like I'm in meetings all day and they're like 2, 3, 4 hours straight, like no breaks. And, like it can be very heavy. So one thing that seems to be really, I guess, if the meeting has to be more than 30, 45 minutes to allow for breaks, small breaks, help breaks, stretch breaks, so on and so forth. Then the second the second aspect is the shift in collaborative digital workspace. And I know, Paul, you're an expert on that. I'm more of a novice, but if we think about Microsoft Team, for instance, I mean, that was new for our department, that we could collaborate and communicate in one single space. Like we had the instant messaging, the audio call, the video call. We were like, oh, what? We can do like just audio and not the video. So it was really, I think, neat to have, but again, a new change. And the third aspect that we notice is the increase in videos, infographics, and images. I think that it's safe to say to some extent that long emails are things from the past, or simply if you do them or write them, send them, that people will not read them. So that those are the three things for the how. And then I thought about, okay, what is the what, right? So what have been the most prominent topics other than work per se, but kind of more at the, like an overview, high level since March 2020. So I think the top three, in my experience and, talking with hundreds of people in the public service, is that there's definitely a greater focus and dialogue on employee health, with an emphasis, avec un emphase, sur la santé psychologique, so an emphasis on mental health. And I definitely hope that you've heard, read, seen messages from your senior leaders that your mental and physical health is crucial, that you should cultivate self-care practices, whatever they are for you. And I know, like, in my professional experience, that, as I mentioned earlier, like short breaks throughout the day, not just during meetings, but just short breaks during the day, whether it was to do like a simple stretch exercise or do some green exercises. So go for a walk outside. And I've also noticed that a lot of teams are implementing walk and talk meetings. So they're not doing video conferencing, they're doing audio only, and they're talking and walking. Obviously, if you have the technologies to support it, but that seems to be an awesome trend. And yeah, okay. Should I?
Non, c'est excellent. Merci beaucoup, Tammy. Je vais juste faire un petit résumé de ce que tu as mentionné ici, spécialement le faire en français. Fait que Tammy a mentionné une couple de différentes choses qui ont changé au fil depuis mars 2020. Il y a eu comme un gros changement à la vidéoconférence. Puis ça a nécessité comme un ajustement à l'interaction humaine jusqu'à un certain point aussi. Puis une chose qu'elle a mentionné aussi, que les réunions, une des choses qui aide beaucoup, c'est que les réunions, quand elles sont plus courtes, c'est plus bénéfique. On pouvait voir des réunions des fois qui duraient de façon virtuelle 3 à 4 heures, qui est comme tellement long. Fait que des réunions de 30 à 40 minutes étaient vraiment une bonne chose à apporter à la table comparé à avant. Puis, deuxième chose qu'elle a remarqué, c'est la collaboration dans les espaces digitales. Puis, Paul est un expert un petit peu plus là-dedans. On va peut-être m'entendre un petit peu plus parler tantôt de son côté. Puis, une augmentation aussi dans l'utilisation des images puis des vidéos. Elle a mentionné que les courriels sont des choses du passé, dans le fond. Fait qu'on voit beaucoup plus de vidéos puis d'images dernièrement aussi. Fait que ça, c'était des choses qui ont changé, mais quoi qui a changé, mais il y a eu un plus gros emphase sur la santé mentale aussi depuis ce temps-là. Puis on espère que vos gestionnaires en ont parlé de la santé mentale. Donc aussi cultiver des pratiques de soins de soi-même, comme aller prendre des marches dehors, s'étirer. Et puis même, elle a partagé que certaines équipes font des espèces de réunions, des walk and talk. Ils vont prendre leur téléphone, ils vont aller prendre une marche, puis ils vont faire leur réunion comme ça. So, y avait-tu d'autres choses que tu voulais rajouter, Tammy? Is there anything else you'd like to bring to that table for that? Or?
I'll just mention the two other elements, and I will not go into much detail because I think they're pretty much self-explanatory, but the what is working from home, just as the meeting the session we're having today, right? We are talking about how to take care, how to communicate in working from home. And I just wanted to add that I saw a recent study from Duxbury, Linda Duxbury, a business professor at Carleton University, and Mike Helinsky, Ryerson University, and they were saying that 1 in 5 people say that they want to go back to work in person full time. So basically, that the majority of us, including myself, we don't want to go back full time, and their data is saying that we want to have a hybrid arrangement. And my last point is promoting diversity and inclusivity, and I think we're gonna discuss that to some extent today, and I know it's important. Voilà, merci.
Excellent, merci beaucoup. Donc, travailler de la maison, c'est un autre gros point du pourquoi il y a eu des changements comme ceci. Puis, elle a mentionné une étude récente qu'une personne sur 5 veulent retourner au bureau lorsque la nouvelle normale recommencera, ou whatever that will be. Mais une personne sur 5, c'est quand même un gros changement de ce qu'on aurait pensé même un an et demi passé. Puis bien sûr, son troisième point, c'est la diversité. On a une opportunité là à vraiment aller chercher une diversité beaucoup plus grande. Puis on va en parler probablement un petit peu plus tard dans notre conversation. Donc, merci beaucoup, Tammy. Paul, would there be anything on your side that you'd like to add to that? Y a-t-il quelque chose, Paul, de ton côté que tu voudrais rajouter par rapport à ces expériences-là?
Je trouve ce que Tammy a dit très intéressant. Plusieurs points là-dedans, notamment le point à la fin sur le 1 sur 5, je pense on l'entend parler. On fait une recherche aussi à FlexGC qui tend à démontrer ça aussi avec les fonctionnaires de la fonction publique fédérale. La question que je me pose, c'est le 1 sur 5, est-ce qu'ils réalisent que leur environnement de travail ne sera pas le même que quand ils sont partis? Et donc là, on se ramasse dans une situation où les gens vont revenir, vont rechercher cet ancien normal-là. Et malheureusement, il est parti à tout jamais. It's gone forever. And so this 1 out of 5 will most probably be dynamic in that people who want to go back in 100% will maybe realize, maybe that's not the best option for me. And vice versa. People who want to stay home 100%, maybe they'll realize with time that they do want to go into the office. And so there's this hybrid dynamic that's going to come about where we will have to be digital by default for the purpose of inclusion, right? Because all those communications that we had in the office, those conversations that we had in the office, if we want to include the people that are not working in the office, the information will need to be digitalized, right? And the way to do that is on these collaborative platforms that we're using, such as Microsoft Teams and et cetera. And the point that Tammy made about emails and communications, what does that pertain to? Well, for one, again, to speak to that point where we used to be able to, talk spontaneously. And so we would avoid certain emails by doing that. Well, now everything is being funneled into Outlook and it's not sorted. Everything is all disorganized in Outlook. And so try to follow a conversation on one specific topic when it's mixed in with all sorts of other different topics. And so that's the added value of these platforms as well, is that you don't have email ping pong anymore. You go into one spot, one conversation, and everything is there and you can work asynchronously. People can, if they want an update on that particular conversation, you map out your workspace, with channels and conversations, and you go to that specific spot and see where we're at. And in that spot, you can also have these collaborative documents on the cloud, right? So instead of having a Word document that you've drafted that you submit to your team, 1 week later, and then it takes 2 weeks to get feedback, well, you supply them with a link, and then everyone's feedback comes at once, right at the beginning. And so that's efficient for so many reasons. One, people can get to it right away. Second, it removes the need to iterate further along in the process because more heads have come together at the beginning to express what needs to be addressed right away. And so it's extremely efficient to work that way. And it's actually a Government of Canada digital standard to work in the open for precisely that reason. So super, super interesting. I just to put a bit of context, quand j'étais à l'Agence du revenu du Canada, je suis venu au Conseil fédéral du Québec en février 2020 et j'étais seul à Québec qui était dans mon équipe. Et là, à cette époque-là, tout le reste de mon équipe était à Montréal. À cette époque-là, on n'avait pas les mêmes pratiques de communication qu'on a actuellement. Et donc, pour être franc, j'étais seul au monde. On n'avait pas les habitudes qu'on a aujourd'hui, donc j'étais tout seul à Québec, puis bien franchement, j'étais un peu déprimé. Sauf que là, la pandémie est arrivée, tout à coup, il a fallu qu'on adapte nos mécanismes de communication, puis là, tout à coup, j'étais inclus plus que jamais, inclus et engagé plus que jamais. Et donc, ça laisse l'ouverture justement à pouvoir aller chercher des gens dans d'autres bassins, des gens de partout dans le pays. Puis, si on prend cette approche-là, ça se fait super bien. And an example I love to give, because people, you often hear like, it's not the same in person, virtually. True, it's not the same. However, I used to work for a tile distributor called Ceratech, and I was at the order desk. And I didn't have video conferencing. All I had was a phone. And I can tell you that I developed some very, very interesting relationships with many of my clients that would call systematically. And this was only over the phone, right? And these were like true human relationships that it was having, even though we didn't have that face-to-face interaction. So it's possible. It's possible. You have to be open. And I think it's a balance, right? And everyone has their own balance. Everyone's going to have to figure out, okay, what works for me and what's possible within the constraints of my organization as well.
Excellent, merci beaucoup. Je vais faire un petit résumé comme dans les petites flipper des langues un petit peu. Ça fait que c'était très intéressant le 1 sur 5, the 1 out of 5, because what a lot of people don't seem to realize is that the environment is going to be really, really different if they do go back for that 1 out of 5 people. Puis le digital par défaut, c'est excellent pour l'inclusion. Puis la façon qu'on converse, comme ça a changé depuis comme des emails de Outlook qui étaient difficiles à comme sorter à travers, puis de passer à travers. Puis là, on a une façon quasiment plus comme organisée de faire des conversations puis d'interagir avec l'autre. Puis on parlait même des documents collaboratifs sur le cloud, comme on peut rendre tout le monde sur la même page beaucoup plus tôt puis avoir tout le monde mis ensemble pour commencer quelque chose à l'inception d'un projet à la place de faire un échange comme qui va de va-et-vient constant. Fait que c'est le fun d'avoir comme des têtes de vue d'ensemble, plus de monde plus tôt. Puis Paul was sharing his story basically that he was in Quebec working with his team who was all in Montreal, and he was not kidding. He did have an impact on his mental health. But once the pandemic hit, it did change the dynamic for the team, and for him made it easier to like interact with the team. And just pour même parler d'un emploi qui était avant, le monde qui dit ça sera pas pareil, it won't be the same, ben you can have relationships through the tools that we've got. And he basically shared the story how he was like on, taking orders on the phone at his prior work and developed relationships, one-on-one relationships with clients. So it is possible. It doesn't matter what tools you have. You don't have to be in person. So excellently said. So we'll go to the next question that we've got here, the next point here, and I'll shoot it towards you, Paul. Can you name a tool, and I think I've already have a good idea, that your team quickly adopted during the pandemic? Why do you think this tool worked for you?
Right, so we were lucky because we already had Microsoft Teams at Canada Economic Development. The rollout for several other organizations came with the pandemic, right? So Microsoft Teams is the obvious answer, but maybe the less obvious answer, and the one I find the most important, is the tool that works. The fact is that there are so many out there right now. It's a fierce competition. All of them have different functionalities, but most are structured somewhat the same, So basically, once you've started testing out all these tools and trying them out, your level of digital literacy will obviously, increase and make it easier to attack these new tools once they are a possibility. One thing to note is that, and as I mentioned, these tools are moving so fast, they're evolving so fast, that when your team analyzed its needs way back when, let's say 6 months ago, well, it's entirely possible that that tool is not the best one for you anymore, and so you really have to be open to optimizing, iterating. So like, for example, if you're using Trello for project management, and basically you realize that nobody's going to track their stuff in there, well, then you have to change something, right? So you have to modify. Why aren't people not going to track their stuff? Okay, well, maybe it's because we're not including that process in our weekly meetings, right? So then all of a sudden, Trello is a fantastic tool. It works great, but you're not using it to its full potential. So you have to ask the question, why are we not using it, and what can we change? Sometimes you'll drop the tool altogether. Sometimes you'll switch tools, but you have to see it as an investment, right? Every time that you make that switch for an added benefit, it is an investment because it'll end up, saving time for the team eventually, or optimizing whatever processes that you've identified. So that's it. The one that works. I think there's also the complexity. That something that's really important to grasp is the concept of Microsoft tenants. So each organization within the public servant is a Microsoft tenant. And so what that means is that it's a specific environment that other organizations don't have access to. And so collaboration in Microsoft 365 is not always possible in an interdepartmental context, because each organization is, protecting their information and their data, have their data management processes, policies. Eventually, there will be a platform called GC Exchange, which is basically a Microsoft 365 environment that's going to be available for all federal public servants. But right now, it's not operational. And so where I'm going with this is that sometimes in an interdepartmental context, you got to choose a tool that both or several organizations can access to be, and that is a custom made solution every time you have a project with different actors, right? So for example, FlexGC, which is an interdepartmental team, we're on Slack, right? Because we can't be on Microsoft Teams. We won't be able to all access. So we're on Slack, and that's where we work. And we use Google Drive, and have to be sure that you don't put protected information, on those external servers. But anything that can be shared publicly, there aren't any issues regarding that. So it's being able to identify that as well, what's protected information and what's unclassified. And if it's unclassified, then it's not an issue. But, obviously important to also respect the policies of your organization in that regard. Yeah.
Excellent, merci beaucoup. Je vais faire un petit résumé. Donc, on est chanceux du côté d'équipe à part, ils étaient chanceux, eux autres, ils travaillaient déjà avec Teams, fait que c'était pas une énorme période d'adaptation tant que ça. Mais vraiment, la chose la plus importante avec les outils qu'on a à notre disposition maintenant, c'est de prendre l'outil qui fonctionne. Fait que puis la familiarité avec les outils s'accumule le plus qu'on l'utilise. Fait qu'il ne faut pas vraiment avoir peur d'essayer des nouvelles choses. Puis ça va aussi en main avec de réaliser que les outils ils se développent tellement vite de ces derniers temps, comme des dernières années, que l'outil qui marchait vraiment bien pour toi 6 mois passés, c'est peut-être plus le meilleur outil pour toi pour faire ce que tu as besoin. Ça fait que c'est une bonne chose de réévaluer de façon assez régulière si ton besoin ou le besoin de l'équipe est rencontré. Puis des fois, il faut juste laisser les outils tomber pour comme le mieux de l'équipe puis le mieux de la productivité. Il faut juste laisser ça aller. Puis Paul mentionnait aussi quelque chose qui s'appelle MS Tenants. C'est peut-être MS locataire. Je ne sais pas exactement comment on le dirait en français, mais c'est quand même limité par département. Ça veut dire que parce qu'une organisation a Teams, ça ne veut pas dire que tout le monde va pouvoir collaborer sur des projets ensemble. Il y a quand même des divisions entre les intégrations de Teams pour différents ministères. Ça fait que plus tard, il y a quelque chose qui s'appelle GC Exchange qui va venir sur la plage. blanche. Fait que ça va nous permettre de collaborer d'une façon un petit peu plus facile. Mais aussi, l'outil qui fonctionne des fois, c'est peut-être des outils à l'externe. Il faut quand même être très soucieux de l'information protégée, être sûr qu'on ne met pas d'informations protégées sur des plateformes comme ça. Donc, merci beaucoup, Paul, bien apprécié. I'll go to Tammy for my next point here. I think you might have something really interesting to bring to the conversation. What are some communication challenges that we are presently facing?
Yeah, bonne question. Alors, je vais répondre, j'ai un peu trois aspects. J'essaie de me limiter à trois. Là. Peut-être c'est trop, là, Benoît, tu pourras me dire. Sinon, I could just go on for and on. And I think I'm just trying to keep an eye on the Q&A, although, like, please, like, jump in anytime. And I think there are some elements here that might help you. So I think the first thing that was a challenge was trying to stay connected when working remotely, right? We had to find ways to replace the water cooler conversations and the drop-ins. I know, like, I really appreciate the drop-ins. People would just come in and, oh, she's here, and, you know, just start talking, and ends up, you know, it was a very fruitful conversation, and so on. And based on everything we've been saying so far is that we've been using many tools, right, to communicate. I mean, there are so many, and some, right, are still using the telephone. And I remember about, like, in August last year, a colleague called me on my work phone, and I honestly did not recognize what was that ringing sound. I was like, oh my God, I totally forgot that the phone, you know, like a phone conversation can work wonderfully. I was just so into Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and GoToMeeting. Literally, that's what I had been using for like 3 solid months. So I think a quick tip on that is I would invite you to think, what is the best communication mean for a given meeting? Donc, pour une situation en particulier, c'est quoi la meilleure méthode? Parce que parfois, and I know, like, for me, at the beginning, I don't know if, like, VC was really cool for me. I was just like it was just an automatisme que j'envoyais le lien de vidéoconférence. Puis là, je me dis, ben, c'est ça, c'est pas tous les gens. Évidemment, il y a même aussi on parle même de l'inclusivité, depending how good is your internet connection. Video conference is not always the best. So yeah, is it VC? Perhaps. I like to do it personally on the first, if the other person is okay with that. Maybe it's just audio, just a phone call, or even sometimes an email is okay. So yeah, I think that is one best practice to ask yourself what is the best way, and ideally to offer options. Benoit, did you wanted to? No? Okay. And then my second point, with those many communication options, it brings me to the element that we all have different realities, right? Diversity in style, in experience, level of comfort, with technology, with time zones, with internet speed. So for instance, I think of, communication styles, or personality preferences. You've all heard about the introversion and extroversion, right? Introversion will typically talk and think, versus extroversion, they talk, think, talk, right? So you can imagine how perhaps people with a preference for extroversion would want to be, in team meetings. Okay, let's talk it out, right? And obviously we would have that in, I guess, the good old days in person, but now it's definitely has changed. In terms of connections, and I noticed that was one of the question, right? I think we all have different needs, but there's definitely, you've probably all heard that we are social beings, that there is definitely a certain healthy level of connectivity that should happen. And there is not one, I think, magic formula that says 1 meeting a day, 15 minutes is the best. I think really, like, there are some people who really need that, who really appreciate that, and some others that are like, once a week or once a month is fine with me. So I think, again, our best friend here is communication, as in asking people like what's the best format, frequency, and similar to what Paul was saying earlier, maybe this is what's the best right now, but in 2 months it could change. For instance, like I'm a new team member within my team. So obviously, well, not obviously, but one thing that I appreciate that is that we've been dedicating time for just social or non-related work, if you want. And that has definitely helped me, with connecting with them, on a more personal level. And I think, with technology, I would just say to be careful with assumptions. It's not because I am younger that I know all the ins and outs of technology, and it's not because I am older that I don't know how Microsoft Teams work. I've seen like it all over the place. So I think it's just to be empathetic with our colleagues. And the last thing is the time zones, right? Probably one of the reasons we're doing it at this time is that this is the the ideal Canada time, so that our colleagues from all over Canada can join. So like trying to be respectful of others' typical start time, lunch break, end of day. I know for us, I'm not sure about you, Benoit, but I'm getting a lot of meetings at like 4:30 to 5:30. I'm like, I have to go pick up the kids and take care. And I know sometimes like I don't even think, like it's kind of like, oh yeah, right. No, this is your lunchtime, and I want to be respectful and mindful of that.
Excellent.
And the last thing will be very easy is I think there's too much information, and then I'm not going to give you too much information about too much information, but yeah, that's it.
Excellent. Merci beaucoup. Well said. Faire un petit résumé vite de la conversation, ça fait que vraiment, c'est avoir une ouverture de conversation. Des fois, c'est bon d'avoir comme de la disponibilité, comme si quelqu'un est disponible pour juste une conversation vite. Un drop-in, que tu peux parler avec la personne rapidement, c'est une excellente opportunité à avoir. Puis même, prendre le téléphone pour appeler quelqu'un. Tammy mentionnait comment quelqu'un l'avait appelé par téléphone, puis ça l'a quasiment choqué parce que ça faisait comme des semaines, ça n'avait pas sonné, puis d'un coup, ça sonne. Ça a comme le surpris un petit peu. Mais c'est vraiment de prendre le meilleur outil pour la transaction qui va se passer. Comme quand tu vas, c'est pas toujours nécessairement une réunion que tu as besoin. Des fois, c'est peut-être juste un email. Des fois, c'est peut-être juste un appel téléphonique. Peut-être juste un petit message sur Teams vite. Ça n'a pas tout le temps besoin d'être une réunion puis être là pour des réunions face à face, là. Ça fait que aussi, elle a mentionné les différentes réalités, des différentes vies de famille. Ça a un impact sur comment on travaille. La capacité d'Internet puis technologique, ça a définitivement un impact aussi. Puis quelque chose qui vient même du chercher quand on était au bureau physiquement, c'est l'introversion versus l'extroversion. On avait déjà ça qui existait dans le milieu de travail, mais ça existe encore aujourd'hui. Puis ça peut être aussi un petit peu mieux, un petit peu pire, dépendant de la personne, dépendant comment ils se sentent. Ça fait que mais vraiment, on est tous des êtres sociaux, puis on a besoin de cette connexion-là, puis c'est tout différent pour chacun de nous. Puis il n'y a pas de formulaire magique. Ça peut être une fois par semaine, ça peut être une fois par mois qu'on se rencontre, ça peut être tous les jours, ça dépend vraiment de la personne. Puis il faut être ouvert à pouvoir communiquer ses besoins-là. Puis ça peut changer, ça peut facilement changer. On peut penser que ça fonctionne bien pour nous d'une façon, puis plus tard changer pas longtemps après. Ça se peut certain aussi, cela. Puis il faudrait faire attention de ne pas présumer parce que quelqu'un est peut-être plus jeune, qui sont plus familiers avec les plateformes technologiques. Ce n'est pas nécessairement le cas. Fait que aussi, dernière petite chose, les fuseaux horaires, Tammy a mentionné l'heure idéale canadienne. Personnellement, je pense qu'on devrait commencer à peut-être utiliser ça à place heure de l'Est puis heure de l'Ouest. Non, heure idéale canadienne. Un nouveau temps, c'est bon, ça. Je vais proposer ça à mon équipe. Puis après ça, un autre chose qui est quand même assez important, c'est trop d'informations. On ne va pas avoir surcharge d'informations, puis on va le laisser à ça, parce que c'est quand même un danger qui existe dans notre présent. Ça fait que maintenant, ce que je vais faire, c'est que je vais aller justement regarder, voir les questions qui nous ont été soumises, voir si on peut regarder les Q&A qui existent. Je vais lire la question, puis après ça, on pourra répondre. So I'm going to go to the Q&A, take a look at the questions that we received, and I'll open the floor to Tammy and Paul, see if they've got anything that they'd like to add to that particular question. The first one, and the most popular question here we have is, I recently started on a new team. I don't know anyone, and I'm having a hard time making more personal connections via virtual. I feel it's affecting my work and focus at times. How do I make those connections? And is this normal? Donc, Paul, Tammy?
I'll take a nab at that. I think like one of the important things that we talk about virtual onboarding is that the onus is not only on the manager, it's not only on the employee, it's on colleagues as well to come get involved and try to include people. I think when you're in a situation where that is not, part of the culture necessarily, I think it's trying to find ways where you could reach out to people, offer to help with tasks if you have capacity, ask questions with people, try to get the conversation going. Also, I preach positive modeling as well, right? So if you have ideas for your team and you want to try things, you can always try to make suggestions on new ways of doing things. There's also tools that are really, really interesting. And I know that it's when you're in a new team, it's difficult to come in and start, saying, I just think it should be like this, but not that. Just like making suggestions. There are different tools that help with team cohesion. One of which is a user manual for me, which is basically sort of like a guide that you share with your teams that's all about yourself. So your work preferences, times, your values. I'll share a link to the labs template that you can have a look at. And there's also the virtual team charters. That is a concept that's been around for a while. And again, perhaps difficult to come in and, try to impose that on your team, but talking about it with your team leader, your supervisor, saying, hey, wouldn't this be interesting to do this? I found some resources. And then, try to get engaged with the team and get those other folks communicating with you, quick chat with one person, a quick meeting with another, and it doesn't have to be long. So these virtual team charters, FlexGC will have a self-guided team charter development activity that we'll be sharing within the next few weeks. There's also some resources on team charters at the School of Public Service. So that's a really interesting exercise to undertake.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Paul. Petit résumé de ce qu'on vient de discuter. Il y a pas juste, c'est pas juste la responsabilité du gestionnaire aussi de intégrer une nouvelle personne à l'équipe. C'est vraiment la responsabilité de l'équipe. C'est que tout le monde a un rôle à jouer pour faire sentir une nouvelle personne dans l'équipe. Puis une façon aussi de faire ça, c'est offrir de l'aide si la capacité est là, de juste mettre en offre comme ça. Demander des questions à tout le monde à l'équipe juste pour gager ou avoir une idée du besoin, voir comment ça va. Puis demander des suggestions comme ça aussi. Puis il y a aussi certains outils d'aide de cohésion d'équipe qui existent, comme un guide d'équipe. Puis Paul va partager un lien un petit peu plus tard ici pour dire comme le guide d'équipe expliquerait comme quel type d'heure qu'une personne aime travailler, c'est quoi qu'il travaille dessus des fois pour familiariser quelqu'un de nouveau dans l'équipe. Puis il a également mentionné une charte virtuelle d'équipe par rapport avec FlexCC, puis il y a aussi l'école de la fonction publique qui a des templates de ça. Ça, c'est quelque chose qui pourrait potentiellement être utilisé. Tammy, was there anything you wanted to add on that particular point as well? Or?
Yes. Je me disais, en fait, merci Paul. Je pense que c'est vraiment, j'ai hâte de voir ces documents-là. And I can say, since I've been experiencing this over the past month, that I really appreciated that I mean, like for me, like COVID, and I'm assuming, and I should not, but I'm assuming that for most of you, like it's been like this race, right? Or this marathon, high speed race, whatever you want to call it. And I haven't had much of non-work related conversation. And one thing that I really appreciate from my current team is that, yeah, we took a little bit of time to connect, because I know that was one of the questions, connect personally. And I had proposed my team, like I initiated, okay, let's do a one-on-one. I just want to get to know you more personally. And I was like, here's a simple model that I've used in the past. It's called FORD. So FORD. F is for family, O is for occupation, R is for recreation, and D is for dream. And we would just, like for some colleagues, we would spend 30 minutes. We would have time to go through all 4 letters. And for some, it was like 30 minutes, 1 letter. We were just, I don't know, so chatty about it, right? It was just kind of an informal yet structured way of, getting to know more your teammates. And I know like it was really neat for me. So thank you. Great question.
Excellent. Excellente réponse. Ça fait que, pour un petit résumé, pas eu beaucoup de conversations non-travail depuis le début de la pandémie, parce que c'est quand même, c'est très focusé sur le travail, mais il y a des façons différentes de connecter personnellement. Puis une des options que Tammy elle avait utilisées avec une équipe avec qui elle travaille ou qu'elle avait déjà utilisé, c'est le concept de FORD, F-O-R-D, qui veut dire la famille, l'occupation, qu'est-ce que tu fais dans tes temps récréatifs, puis ton rêve. Là, fait que c'est quand même très intéressant, une façon dynamique d'approcher ça pour apprendre à connaître les autres. Fait que, puis je pense que ça vient rattacher. I think that goes a little bit with what Paul was saying. Like, if you are on a new team, don't be afraid don't hesitate to do these things, to propose these to the team. So if you're having like a hard time connecting, you can actually go ahead and suggest these things to the team as well. Don't wait on it. So those are good tools to act on. So we'll go to another question. There's a few more that are very, very interesting. And I'll basically read the question here. With the increase of meetings, emails, and constant notifications, I sometimes find it hard to focus. Any best tips to communicate / better focus my attention to ensure I'm efficient when completing my ongoing tasks and projects? Would either of you have any insight into that particular question? Avez-vous des idées?
I do.
Okay.
I have ADHD. And so you can imagine that when there's tons of stuff going on, it's extremely difficult to focus. One of the tricks that I have is I close everything that I'm not working on. I use blocks to work. There's, evidence that shows that working in blocks, like 25-minute blocks, sprints, can be a really efficient way to work. 25 minutes, get up 5 minutes, there's just focusing on the task at hand, turning off your notifications. Sometimes you have notifications for the same thing, but on several devices. Okay. So you hear ding, 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 ding. How are you supposed to focus? I mean, and especially if you're stressed out during that time, every ding that you hear will come and cause you an adrenaline rush oftentimes, So you got to take out all those stimuli that are taking you away from the task at hand. I think Tammy talked about it a lot, the excess number of meetings. That's a productivity killer for sure. Scheduling short meetings, as she mentioned, we like to do 25-minute meetings opposed to 30, or 50-minute meetings opposed to 1 hour, just so that you have that buffer. You can get up and stretch your legs and do whatever. But also just, make sure that you're having meetings when they're absolutely necessary, because a lot of the work can be done asynchronously. Right? So there you go.
Tammy, est-ce quelque chose que tu voulais rajouter à ça? Or anything you'd like to add to that particular comment?
Well, I mean, just to add to Paul, I was going to say the blocks. I mean, there is research supporting that, right? That you get into the zone. And when we get out of our zone, it takes us at least 15 minutes to get us back in the zone. So depending what kind of work you have to do, sometimes we have to be in our zones, right? So yeah, as you said, Paul, productivity killer with all the prompts, the distraction. And I've also noticed some teams or employees will say, okay, I checked my, like, and this is, I think I'm really looking forward to the tool that you shared, Paul, because I think it's kind of part of the virtual charter. Okay, I do emails, for instance, let's say, depending again on the work that I do in the morning, 30-minute, whatever, like in the morning and before I go, end of day or after lunch or whatever. And this is my dedicated space. Okay, you will get an answer, and then so that people don't expect an instant reply. Often to non-urgent matter. So yeah, so that's it. Merci.
Non, c'est bon. Paul, il a partagé qu'il vit avec déficit de l'attention. Ça fait que c'est vraiment quelque chose qui vient chercher spécialement quand on a tellement de distractions comme ça. Il a fallu qu'il y ait des outils puis des choses pour vraiment pouvoir l'aider avec ça. Puis une des bonnes petites astuces qu'il a mentionné, c'est comme ferme toutes les affaires que tu travailles avec, sauf la chose que tu fais que tu te focuses dessus en ce moment. Ça, c'est un excellent petit truc, ça. Puis de travailler à des blocs de temps, puis Tammy a justement fait l'écho de ça, de travailler comme, OK, disons le matin, je travaille sur des emails, puis après ça, si quelqu'un m'envoie un courriel dans l'après-midi, ben ils savent que le lendemain, comme je vais faire ça juste dans la matinée. Puis quand on parle de bloc de temps, c'est peut-être avoir comme, OK, je travaille pour ça, sur une chose pour 25 minutes exactement, je prends une petite pause de 5 minutes, après ça, je reviens. C'est parce que des fois aussi, on va se rendre dans des espèces des states de flow où est-ce quand on travaille dans quelque chose, ça va bien, on veut rester dans cet état-là pour pouvoir continuer à travailler dessus. Puis n'importe quelle petite distraction peut venir déranger ça. Fait qu'on veut maintenir ça autant que possible. Puis vraiment, c'est enlever toutes les espèces de petites notifications qu'on a, comme s'il y a un message qui rentre, on a un petit ping. Ben des fois, on a le petit ping qui apparaît sur comme 4-5 différents écrans, puis téléphone, puis tout ça. Ça peut être extrêmement distrayant. Puis vraiment fait un écho aussi d'avoir des réunions plus courtes. Pas nécessairement pour 1 heure, mais des fois, c'est juste 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Ça n'a pas besoin d'être très, très long. Puis c'est encore une fois, ça vient chercher ce qu'on avait discuté tantôt avec écouter l'équipe et être ouvert à l'adaptation. So, excellent.
Paul,
we've got, yes.
Can I just to, something came up for me. And, and I'm part of that. Today, with a lot of technology, information, we kind of expect an instant response. And I would challenge all of ourselves, including myself, and I've been trying to do that, really, that I really, whether it's instant messaging, which is kind of the purpose to some extent, but I really don't. Like, for me, it's just a quick, it's not long enough for an email, so I just have a quick question. And I answer it whenever you can. So yeah, because to me, someone who responds, I mean, in a reasonable time frame, 24 hours, 48, whatever a week, depending what's the situation, I'm okay with that, and that's okay. And I think actually that's probably telling me that you're busy and more productive than someone who responds to every single thing all the time. Yeah. So anyways, just like kind of I'm just throwing it out there so we can think, including myself. Merci.
I think we were conditioned up to a certain point. Sometimes when you send a message, especially on the platforms that we've got, when you see those 3 little dots pop up, you're like, oh, okay. And Paul, you mentioned something incredibly interesting earlier. You get that little hit of adrenaline, that dopamine hit, right? So there is something to that as well. So I think we've got a chance or time for one more questions, and I'm going to put out to both of you again. The question I've got here is there any suggestion for what to do if your manager or team is not very keen on using new tools? We've basically just been using email for 95% of our communications and only using the video call feature on Teams for once a week meetings. It's left me feeling quite disconnected from my team. Well, that was a submission that we received. Does that ring somewhat true to both either of you? Ça vous sonne-tu familier?
For sure. I talked earlier about positive modeling and the importance of that. Now, in this, in that particular context, and Tammy talked about it earlier, why are these people not keen on new technology? We have to ask that question first, right? Because it's when you understand the user that you can address that and approach them in a certain way, right? So if it's because they're not comfortable, then maybe it's just trying something really small. And I'll give you an example. Because as I said, since the beginning of this pandemic, it's been, we've evolved tremendously in our way of working and communicating. And one of the things that I integrated into our team is sending a link to a document that's been shared in a specific channel, and actually doing that from the get-go, right? So we need to draft up an email for XYZ reason, like Word, and then 15 seconds later there's a link and nothing's in there, right? But that's the link. That's where we're going to work on this, and that it gets done extremely fast. I mean, sometimes when we're available, we can all be writing at the same time. But perhaps there are certain people that don't even know that that's a possibility right now. And there are so many kinds of personas out there. There's the tech savvy people, but there's also the people that are extremely intimidated by it. And so just by opening their horizons, by saying, hey, I started this document on the cloud. Here's the link, right? And please feel free to go work on it or do whatever. And, oh, look, this is really cool, and be enthusiastic about it. I know that not everybody has the possibility of uploading documents on Teams, but like the same thing applies with a private network of drives, right? Where you can send a link to the document instead of a document itself, right? So just adapting those little changes. And as we say in French, it's train va loin. It's train va loin. And perturber, right? Diplomatiquement, mais perturber néanmoins. C'est causer de la disruption, causer des changements, sortir les gens de leur zone de confort, faire face à des gens que ça leur tentera pas, être OK avec ça, se reprendre une autre fois. T'sais?
Excellent. Très bien dit. Tammy, est-ce que quelque chose que tu voulais rajouter à ça par hasard?
Je dirais que ça serait, pour ajouter à ce que Paul vient de dire, donc, essayez, puis moi, j'ai souvent des gestionnaires qui me disaient, parce qu'on n'oublie pas que la majorité des gens, on n'est pas habitués avec le contexte virtuel de se voir à la caméra. Puis, j'ai beaucoup de gestionnaires qui me partageaient que c'est nouveau pour eux de gérer une rencontre. Ils ressentaient like they were kind of the center of attention. So maybe I guess we don't know much, right, in terms of their context from the question, but maybe there's a little bit of that happening. And maybe it can be more of a progression, like maybe would audio be more appropriate than email? I know in many cases for me, yes, that would be way easier. And maybe there's that technology that there's still, like remember for those of you who are very at ease with that, rewind, many months or many years ago, how it felt like. So maybe there's some of that happening for those people who are kind of resisting, like, no, emails is fine, right? Although it can take, I know it takes me like way longer to write an email than a quick chat, audio or whatnot. Thank you.
Excellent. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. So, faire une petite récapitulation de ce que Paul mentionnait tantôt. Vraiment, c'est important d'être un modèle positif. C'est des gens qui se sentent hésitants. soit l'espèce de changement que tu veux voir dans les autres jusqu'à un certain point. Puis il y a des gens qui savent peut-être même pas comment utiliser les outils à leur plein potentiel. Fait que si à la place de discuter qu'on a un courriel à envoyer, ben commence un document, envoie un lien, c'est directement accessible pour tout le monde en partant. Puis peut-être qu'il y a quelqu'un qui va faire « Oh mon Dieu, je ne savais même pas que tu pouvais faire quelque chose comme ça. » Fait qu'il faut vraiment comme adapter à ces petits changements-là puis essayer des choses comme ça. Puis comme Tammy aussi, elle avait mentionné, il y a peut-être des gens qui n'aiment peut-être pas se voir à l'écran. On retourne un petit peu à l'introversion ou l'extroversion aussi un petit peu. Fait que quand il y a des gens qui se voient à l'écran, ils vont penser que tout le monde les regarde tout le temps. Puis ça, c'est une espèce de période d'adaptation aussi pour ça. Donc,
Et Benoît,
oui.
Juste dernière petite affaire, ça va être 15 secondes.
Vas-y.
Pour répondre à la question,
Oui.
c'est toujours winner de citer les normes numériques du gouvernement du Canada aussi. Parce que ça, c'est de l'information qui est pas gouvernementale, c'est la volonté, la vision du gouvernement. Et donc, quand on arrive, on fait aller voir c'est quoi ces normes-là, essayer de les instaurer dans votre équipe, dire « Ah ouais, mais c'est une norme numérique, ça, on devrait peut-être essayer ça. » Donc, ça, c'est tout le temps une bonne arme à avoir dans son trousseau.
Would you mind repeating that in English? Because I think there's an excellent point to finish on there, Paul.
Sure, yeah, sure. Make sure, like, when you're trying to, come up with changes or make suggestions, make sure that you quote the Government of Canada digital standards. There are 10 of them. You can look them up. They're on the school's website. And go have a look at them, and I'm pretty sure that you'll be able to quote a few to make some changes in your team.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Paul. Merci beaucoup, Tammy. You two were amazing. I've got so many pages of notes. I don't know what I'm going to do with them all now, but thank you so much for your time. You have been fantastic. Thank you to everyone who participated on today's call. You guys were awesome. We had so many good questions that we couldn't all get to them. But remember that you can register for the next event for every Tuesday. And n'oubliez pas que vous pouvez vous enregistrer pour les prochains événements chaque mardi. And thank you so much for joining us today. So that's all we've got for you today. Thanks a lot. Cheers to you too.
Thanks.
Merci.
Thank you.
Merci.
Bye.